Marco Delgado hadn't planned on filming anything that day. He'd brought his camera out of habit more than intention, the way you grab your keys even when you're only stepping outside for 5 minutes. It was a Tuesday morning in late September, the kind the Pacific Northwest occasionally hands you like an apology for all the gray months. Glassy water, low golden light, and air that smelled faintly of cedar and salt. He'd borrowed his brother-in-law's aluminum skiff to take his 13-year-old nephew, Tomas, out past the kelp beds near the northern edge of Puget Sound. Nothing serious, no destination, no plan. Tomas had been having a rough go of it at school that fall, and Marco figured a few hours on the water would do what no amount of talking ever really could. They'd been drifting for maybe 40 minutes when Marco flipped open the lens cap and started recording. Not because anything was happening, just because the light on the water looked too good to let disappear. That was the last peaceful moment either of them would have for a while. It started with the birds. There had been a small group of mureys sitting on the surface, maybe 60 yards out, bobbing, preening, occasionally dunking their heads. Marco had half-planned to film them. Then, without any obvious reason, they launched themselves into the air and scattered in different directions. Not lazily, the way birds leave when a boat gets too close, urgently, like something had been decided beneath them. Tomas noticed, too. He sat up straighter in the bow and looked at his uncle without saying anything. The water around the boat had gone very still. Not calm, still. There's a difference, and if you've spent enough time on the ocean, you learn to feel it. Marco lowered the camera. He had grown up fishing these waters with his father and grandfather before that, and something in the base of his skull was sending up a signal he hadn't felt in years. Then the surface broke about 20 feet off the port side, and what came out of it changed the entire nature of the morning. A harbor seal, a big male, maybe 220 pounds, launched itself almost completely clear of the water. Tomas grabbed the bench with both hands. Marco didn't move. He'd encountered seals before, curious ones that followed kayaks, bold ones that surfaced close enough to startle you. But he had never, in 30-something years on these waters, seen one climb aboard a boat. It simply wasn't something they did. The seal pulled itself fully onto the deck and lay there panting in a way that didn't look like exertion. It looked like terror. Its sides were heaving. There was a long, raw scrape along its left flank, fresh, still weeping. His first instinct was practical and not noble. Get this animal back in the water before it panics and hurts one of us. A harbor seal is not a lapdog. Those jaws are built to crush fish bone, and a frightened wild animal in a confined space is not something you treat casually. He looked at Tomas and kept his voice very quiet. Don't move fast. Don't reach toward it. Just stay where you are. The seal did not try to bite anyone. It didn't bark or thrash. What it did was drag itself towards the center of the boat, away from the water on both sides, and stay there. Its head was up. Its eyes, dark, liquid, enormous, were fixed on the surface of the Sound with an intensity that made Marco's stomach tighten. Because that's exactly how prey looks when whatever is chasing it is still close. Marco thought about the scrape on the animal's side. Harbor seals in Puget Sound have a short list of things that can do that kind of damage. He looked at the thin aluminum hull beneath his feet and felt it differently than he ever had before. He could start the engine and run for the harbor, 2 miles, under 10 minutes at full throttle. But starting a cold outboard is not a quiet event. He could use an oar to ease the seal back over the side, but one look at the animal told him it wasn't going anywhere, and he knew what he'd be sending it back into. So he did the thing that went against every instinct he had. He stayed still, kept quiet, and waited. 20 minutes passed, maybe 25. The seal didn't move from the center of the deck, and Marco didn't move from his seat. The three of them drifted together in a silence completely unlike the comfortable quiet they'd started the morning with. Then the seal shifted. It moved in Marco's direction, slowly, with no apparent urgency, and pressed itself against his leg. Marco held his breath. The animal was warm in a way he hadn't expected. Dense, solid, radiating heat through his jeans. He could feel the rapid pulse of its breathing gradually begin to slow. He didn't know why he did what he did next. He lowered his hand carefully and rested it on the animal's back, between its shoulders. It didn't flinch. The seal let out a long breath that seemed to come from somewhere much deeper than its lungs. Tomas watched from the bow and didn't say a word. Marco kept talking to the seal in a low murmur, not words exactly, just sounds, the kind you make when you want to reassure something you don't share a language with. He has no idea if it helped. He suspects it helped him more than the animal. Then, maybe half an hour after the seal had first landed on the boat, something shifted, a change in the quality of the air, a loosening of the stillness around them. The Murras reappeared in the distance, landing back on the water. A great blue heron crossed the sky far overhead, unhurried. The sound felt like itself again. The seal raised its head. It looked at the water for a long moment. Then it looked at Marco. He doesn't read emotion into animals easily. He was raised by fishermen, not sentimentalists, but he says that look has stayed with him in a way he can't rationally explain. Then the seal moved back toward the side of the boat, looked down one more time, and slipped over the edge with barely a splash. It surfaced 10 feet out, looked back at the boat, then dove and was gone. Marco sat without moving for a while. Tomas came back from the bow and sat beside him on the middle bench, and they stayed like that, shoulder to shoulder, until the engine turned over and they pointed the bow toward home. The video has been seen by a lot of people since Marco posted it. Most comment on how peaceful it looks. A seal resting on a boat while a man gently strokes its back. Warm light, calm water. And it is peaceful, watching it that way. But Marco knows what's not visible in the frame. The stillness before it happened. The fresh scrape on the animal's side. The feeling of sitting over thin aluminum over deep, cold water, not knowing what was underneath. The decision to do nothing, which turned out to be the only right call, though he had no way of knowing that at the time. He also knows that Tomas called him that same night and said simply, "Uncle Marco, that was the best day." Marco said, "Yeah, it really was." He still doesn't know what was hunting that seal. Whatever it was never broke the surface, not once during the whole long wait. But something wild and frightened looked at a boat full of humans and chose to trust it anyway. He doesn't have a clear explanation for that. He's not sure he needs one.